Hi guys, welcome back to Mer Murder, where we put the Mer in murder. I'm your host, Mercedes Rose, and I'm so happy to be back. I was away for like 2 weeks. I just wanted a little bit of a break for the Thanksgiving holiday, and I really hope you guys had a great Thanksgiving. I absolutely did. I went to California and I spent some time with my boyfriend's family. It was really fun. I love California. However, I have decided that I don't think I can move there. I would love to, but I don't think I could move there because there are way too many homeless people, which already makes me so upset. And then a lot of them also have dogs. We were going to the grocery store to do like last minute Thanksgiving shopping, and oh my God, there was this old man out there, homeless old man in a wheelchair, already sad. And he had like the smallest little black and white puppy in his lap, and he like had him wrapped up in like I can't even talk about it. It makes me so upset. I hate seeing homeless people. I hate seeing people struggle. And then on top of that, I hate to see animals struggling, especially dogs. Oh my gosh. It was really upsetting, but I did have a really great Thanksgiving. I hope you guys did as well. I hope you didn't miss me too much because I'm back now. Actually, I hope you missed me a lot so that you're rushing back to come see me. Before we get into everything, I just want to thank you guys so much for the overwhelming support that I've been getting for the show. Even if it's just 10, 20, 30 people, I really don't care. Just getting positive feedback in general is just it means so much to me because this really is one of my passions. I really take so much pride and joy in creating and producing things for you guys. This is one of my dreams. I really have been a huge fan of true crime, and I've always wanted to tell people stories for such a long time, and I really just put myself out there. So I'm really thankful that you guys are so welcoming and so kind to me. I did get a really sweet comment. I'm not going to explicitly say the name or any usernames. I'm never going to do that to you guys because I know it's kind of scary to be in the true crime community and not really sure who might hear things, who this might reach. So I'm never going to put you guys in harm's way ever, but I would directly read it, but it's on my phone, and unfortunately I use my phone to record these episodes for video. But it was along the lines of just being very like proud of me and recognizing how authentic and truly passionate I am about this. And it makes me so happy to know that you guys can see that and that it does translate over video. Like you can obviously tell and see, or at least audio if you're just listening, but you guys can tell how much I really do take pride and enjoy doing this for you guys. And that just makes me so happy. I'm really so grateful to be doing this. And I'm so grateful to be a part of this community and be welcomed with such open arms. And I really all I can say is thank you. Just thank you so much. And one day when I have it, I promise I will give you guys the world, okay? Thank you so much for sticking by my side and supporting me since day one. Thank you so much to the person that left me that comment. It was really sweet. It literally made me cry. If you guys do want to support the show, of course, I have the YouTube channel. You can listen on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, everything that you can listen to podcasts on. We are there. We also have a TikTok and an Instagram and a Discord. So if you guys want to be a part of any of these groups, any of these communities, please feel free to join and support the show any way you can. I would really appreciate it. But thank you so much for just being here every single week. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for supporting. Thank you so much for everything. I love you guys so much, and we'll just get into the show. So this week we are actually covering a case that was suggested to me by a really good friend of mine. Again, I'm never going to say your name or make you feel uncomfortable, feel like I'm putting you in harm's way, unless you explicitly tell me so, to be like, oh, shout out to you. But again, I will never say your name because I know it's kind of uncomfortable to be in the true crime space and not know who this might get out to. So shout out to you. You know who you are. This is for you. But along with this being our first friend suggested case, this is also our first international case. Today we are going to one of the most beautiful countries in Central America, just south of Mexico, Guatemala. A country famous for its ancient Mayan history, beautiful people and heritage, and stunning landscape. But this week we will be recognizing Guatemala for something more sinister, being home to one of the most corrupt and mishandled missing persons / murder cases you've probably heard this week. Cristina Siekavizza was born in a small town in Guatemala City on December 9th, 1977. She was born into a loving family consisting of her parents Juan Luis, Angelis Molina Siekavizza, and her sister Susana Siekavizza. I'm not sure if her sister is older or younger than her. I could only find that was just her sister. And like a lot of parts in the case, it was really hard to find the same information. A lot of things would be like, she was this year's old, she went missing on this day, she went missing at this hour, the last time she was heard from was 6 o'clock. Another article would say like 7 o'clock. Like it was It was really hard to get straight, clear, concrete evidence and facts on this case, but I tried my best and I cross-referenced a lot of my sources, and I hope to do her story as much justice as I possibly can. Like I said, there was very little that I found regarding Cristina's childhood and upbringing, such as her hobbies, interests, or even her educational journey, which is always so frustrating to me because our victims are so much more than the stories that we tell, and I wish I could tell you a lot more about her. But we can pick up on Cristina's life around the time that our story begins. Cristina Siekavizza met Roberto Eduardo Barreda de Leon in her early 20s. Roberto came from a very affluent family who were very, very important people in the Guatemalan society during this time. His brother-in-law and sister were both lawyers. His father was the judge of the Court of Appeals, one of the highest courts in the Guatemalan judicial system. And on top of all that, his mother was actually Beatriz Ofelia de Leon, the first woman in Guatemalan history to become the president of the Supreme Court of Justice in Guatemala. So honestly, what woman wouldn't fall in love with a man with such a stellar background? Roberto was surrounded by high-quality people and obviously had a bright future ahead of him. So that made it even easier for Cristina to fall in love with him, and eventually the two got married. Things were going pretty great in their relationship. Roberto could provide a life of not only luxury, but also stability for their soon-to-come family, and Cristina was actually able to make the decision to leave her high-paying job at the bank and become a stay-at-home mom, as starting a family was one of their biggest goals and top priorities at the time. And that is exactly what happened on July 5th of 2004 when the couple welcomed their first child, a baby boy named Roberto Jose Barreda Siekavizza. And just 3 years later, on October 20th, 2007, they welcomed a baby girl named Maria Mercedes Barreda Siekavizza. Shout out to Mercedes! The Barreda Siecavizzas were now the perfect nuclear family everyone expected them to be. They lived in a beautiful home in a nice area in San Jose Pinula, a city just 13 miles away from the capital, Guatemala City. And life seemed to be pretty easy for them. Roberto worked hard as the owner of a construction company to provide for his family, and he even was able to hire a live-in maid to help Cristina around the house. So no one in the family really ever had to worry too much about anything. Until one day on July 7, 2011, where their lives would change forever, leaving the family torn and desperate for answers. July 7, 2011 was a day that started off like any other. Roberto and Cristina got out of bed early that morning and got their children Roberto Jr., who was now 7 years old, and Maria, who was now 4 years old, ready for school. It was Roberto Sr. who was tasked with taking the kids to school that morning because Cristina regularly went on a walk around the neighborhood early in the morning as her daily dose of exercise. So Cristina, who was now 33 years old, kissed her children and husband goodbye as she left for the morning at around 6:45 a.m. and started her journey around their quiet and gated suburb of Guatemala City. The day continued on as usual until around noon or the afternoon when Cristina's parents reached out to Roberto Sr. Angelis Siekavizza, Cristina's mother, was expecting Cristina to meet for lunch, but she never showed. Not only that, but she didn't answer any of her phone calls that she received from her mother. Roberto tried easing the parents' worries, saying that he'd reach out to Cristina and that she was probably just busy. But later in the day, the school also alerted Roberto that their children Roberto Jr. and Maria were not picked up from school by their mother, and they were instead given a ride home by a family friend. This is where the search for Cristina began. Hours turned into days, and yet there was still no sign of Cristina. Instead of contacting the Guatemalan police, Roberto and his family hired a private investigator to aid in the search for Cristina. For some reason, Roberto believed that Cristina's disappearance was linked to organized crime and may be a result of actions by the cartel. Although there were never any ransom letters or calls regarding Cristina, the PI took these claims very seriously, and he investigated Cristina's disappearance as a kidnapping case. But as they were coming up on a week since Cristina's disappearance, the investigator was removed from the case, and the Barreda family began cooperating with local police as well as the district attorney's office into an investigation for Cristina's disappearance. An investigation that was originally started by Cristina's parents a week before. For days, investigators interviewed Cristina's friends and family. They wanted to know things like the last time they heard from her, what her marriage and personal life was like, and if there would have been any reason as to why she would just up and leave her seemingly perfect life and her 2 young children. Stephanie Klisman, a good friend of Cristina's, told investigators that Cristina and Roberto Sr.'s relationship was pretty normal. The couple had their ups and downs like any other married couple, but it was clear to her that Cristina was, quote, in love. However, the relationship between the two began to change negatively. Following a great loss in December of 2010, Cristina was actually pregnant with the couple's 3rd child during this time. but unfortunately she suffered a miscarriage and she lost the baby. To make matters worse, Roberto actually blamed Cristina, saying that the miscarriage was her fault, and this led to a very big strain in their relationship and constant fighting between the two. There was also a rumor while I was doing my research and all my investigating. There was a rumor, they were saying that Roberto was having an affair with some drug lord's daughter. I don't know. And then that's when they tried to make it seem like that's why she was being held for ransom or kidnapped, because maybe the daughter of the drug lord retaliated, didn't want her to be with them anymore. Something insane. There's something very bizarre, something very odd. A lot of people think it was just a way to kind of steer the investigation into a different way so that they couldn't really find out what happened to her. But we'll get to that later. Stephanie also recounts the last time she spoke to Cristina, which was actually the day before her disappearance, July 6, 2011. In fact, she said, quote, "Cristina was calling me all day." That day, the Siekavizza family had been planning and celebrating a birthday party for their son, Roberto Jr., and Cristina was very excited but also a little stressed. Most of the couple's friends and family were in attendance for the party, including Cristina's parents, who actually left early, but not before making plans to have lunch with Cristina the following day. Plans that we now know Cristina would miss due to her disappearance the following day. The last phone call between Stephanie and Cristina occurred at 6:40 p.m. They were just updating each other on their day. However, this call ended rather quickly due to Roberto Sr.'s arrival at the home. Cristina rushed off the phone in a concerning fashion, saying she needed to prepare dinner for him now that he was home. And Stephanie was slightly worried, but she brushed off the feeling, not thinking much of it. And this was the last time she ever heard from Cristina. Angelique Siekavizza, Cristina's mother, went to Cristina's home in efforts to find any clues about where her daughter could have gone to. She was relieved to find her grandchildren at the home, but the feeling of relief was very brief as there was still no sign of her daughter. However, Cristina's cell phone and wallet were still in her master bedroom, so this must have meant that she couldn't have gone very far. Angelique also asked her grandchildren and neighbors if they had seen Cristina or if maybe they had known where she went off to, but unfortunately she got no's from everyone. And alarmingly, her grandchildren actually said that they didn't even see their mother before they left for school that morning. This led Angelique and Juan Luis to alert the police themselves and file a missing persons report. Cristina's sister, Susana Siekavizza, quickly traveled to San Jose Pinula, the city where her sister lived and disappeared from. She told police that everyone close to the couple did know that they were having some issues, primarily due to Roberto Sr.'s insecure and controlling behavior towards Cristina. He often isolated her from her friends and family and was constantly limiting her access to the family's money and how she could spend it. Susana also expressed many concerns regarding the Beretta family's behavior, their lack of concern regarding Cristina's well-being, and how it seemed that they showed little to no interest in actually finding Cristina. She believed that the Beretta family knew more than what they were leading on, and that they were hiding the truth to protect Roberto in some way. And Roberto's actions weren't exactly reassuring either. Shortly after Cristina disappeared, he was MIA for about 2 days, but according to him, he was just stressed about the whole situation and wanted to go to the spa to relax. So he took a 2-day spa vacation after his wife went missing. Focus obviously shifted from maybe an outside source being the reason that Cristina disappeared to now Roberto and the Beretta family. Because Roberto had very strange behavior following his wife's disappearance, and he also gave a very odd explanation regarding why she may have disappeared. At one point, Roberto said Cristina may have disappeared in order to take her own life because she was struggling with the fact that she miscarried their third child over 7 months ago. But alarm bells were already ringing for police, and they decided to investigate further. The police went to San Jose Pinula in order to raid the Siekavizza home, but upon first glance, there wasn't anything very out of the ordinary to investigators. However, after a luminol test, it was revealed that there was numerous bloodstains all over the main bedroom, and there was also a comforter missing from the bed. The overwhelming pressure from the police as well as the community loomed on Roberto and the Beretta family. This actually became a very high-profile case in Guatemala because of those involved and their apparent abuse of power and judicial misconduct. At the time, there was also a very big issue with femicide within the country, and locals yearned for change in the system and real protection for the women of Guatemala. Everyone just wanted to know the truth about what happened to Cristina and fought so hard for it to come out so there could finally be justice for her and her family. On July 24, 2011, 2 weeks after Cristina's disappearance with still no sign of her, there was a demonstration held with over 500 people in attendance. It was led by Cristina's parents urging for justice for their daughter and any information regarding her whereabouts. The Beretta family was also in attendance, but seeing all the attention this case was getting, all the people desperate for answers, and feeling the immense pressure to expose the truth, just 10 days later, on August 3rd, Roberto fled the country, taking his 2 children with him and disappearing completely. An international arrest warrant soon followed, and the hunt for Roberto and his children began, all while the search for Cristina was still ongoing. Now, if you remember from earlier in the story, the family actually had a live-in housekeeper, someone who helped Cristina every single day take care of the home. The housekeeper's name was Petrona, and Petrona gave her first statement to police on July 18, 2011, just a little over a week after Cristina disappeared. Originally, Petrona told police that she hadn't seen Cristina the morning of her disappearance on July 7th, even though she was at the Siekavizza home starting her job for the day. But she did say that everything seemed normal the night before on July 6, 2011, which was the last time anyone ever heard from Cristina. However, after further investigation, police discovered that Petrona was in fact not at the Siekavizza home on the morning of July 7, 2011. In fact, she was actually at the Beretta residence, Roberto's family. So on August 7, 2011, just 4 days after Roberto fled the country with his 2 children, Petrona was arrested for concealing information and she was taken into questioning once again. Petrona was noticeably frightened and anxious, too fearful to cooperate and speak with police this time around. But after a few moments of easing her worries, she finally felt safe enough to speak with investigators. Petrona gave the true account of what happened that night on July 6, 2011, and her statement this time around would change the course of this investigation forever, because it would now go from a missing persons case to a homicide. Petrona told police that on the night of July 6, 2011, she was at the Siekavizza home doing her nightly duties when suddenly an argument broke out between Roberto and Cristina. Petrona says that the couple had been arguing for over 2 hours at this point, and then suddenly Cristina ran outside to their balcony, pleading for help from the neighbors or anyone nearby to call the police or try to intervene. Unfortunately, no one responded, giving Roberto enough time to drag her back into the home and turn up their television to drown out Cristina's screams and pleas for help. And for the next 40 minutes, with their 2 children and housekeeper just in the next room, Petrona witnessed the sounds of Roberto beating Cristina to death. She told officers that when the scream stopped, she came out the room and saw into the master bedroom Cristina's motionless body lying on the floor in a pool of blood. Nearby also laid a golf club. She could only assume that that was the weapon Roberto used to beat Cristina to death. Petrona says upon seeing her, Roberto ordered her to clean up the blood while he took care of Cristina's body, wrapping it up and moving her into his car. Then he forced Petrona to drive with him to his parents' house, where they threatened her for hours about staying quiet about what happened that night. They threatened Petrona and told her that if she said anything to anyone about what happened that night, that they would not only kill her, but also her 2 nephews as well. And as night became morning, Petrona was still trapped at the Beretta household. She witnessed Roberto, along with his mother, cleaning off the blood from Cristina's body from off his car's interior. This new information about what really happened that night before Cristina's disappearance not only turned the case from a missing persons to a homicide, but it also fueled the search for Roberto even more so that the authorities could arrest him and get him to reveal the location of Cristina's body so she and her family could finally get the justice that they deserved. Weeks after the new information was revealed to investigators, 3 people were arrested for their part in Cristina's disappearance and alleged murder. Oscar Cuevas, the PI who was initially hired by the Beretta family, was arrested for obstructing the investigation by halting the progress that could have been made while they were investigating the bogus claims of a kidnapping. And Joaquin Flores, who was Roberto's brother-in-law, along with Javier Ruiz, were both arrested for allegedly helping Roberto move and conceal Cristina's body. So at this point in the story, Cristina, or at least her remains, are still missing, Roberto is still on the run along with his children, and the investigation is still ongoing with little to no help from the powerful yet secretive and elusive Beretta family. Ofelia de Leon, Roberto's mother and the former president of the Supreme Court, was arrested and jailed on October 21st, 2011. This was actually the day after the still missing Maria Mercedes' 4th birthday. And also earlier in the story, I think I said that she was 4 at the time. She had to have been 3. A lot of my sources, again, were kind of all over the place and very hard to keep up with. There was a lot of misinformation, not only misinformation, but also just differing information from a lot of sources. I had to cross-reference a lot to try to get the right information because one source would say her 5th birthday, one would say her 4th birthday, one would say she was 2 years old when Cristina went missing, one would say she was 3. I had to do a lot of the math myself. So I think earlier I said that she was 4 when Cristina went missing. She had to have been 3 because this was her 4th birthday when her grandmother was arrested. So my apologies for probably saying 4 in the beginning. But anyway, Ophelia was arrested for corruption of justice as well as being an accomplice of Roberto's. It was obvious that regardless of her son's actions, she was still supporting him and trying to conceal his whereabouts while preventing him from being prosecuted in any way. Investigators also tracked Ophelia's bank transactions and found she was wiring money abroad, assuming that she was sending these lump sums of money to her fugitive son. A reward of 15,000 quetzales, Guatemalan currency, which is also about $1,958.53 in US dollars, was offered to anyone who had information about the whereabouts of Roberto and his 2 children, Roberto Jr. and Maria. Finally, in November of 2013, over 2 years after Cristina's disappearance and alleged murder, a tip was delivered to the Survivors Foundation, Voces por Cristina, or the English translation, Voices for Cristina. This organization was created by her friends and family sometime in 2011 following Cristina's disappearance, and it advocated for the justice for domestic violence victims. The group was sent an image of a middle-aged man who was average height and overweight who resided in Mexico. His name was Carlos Roberto Barrera Villarreal. He was a pretty well-known member of his social circles within the community, and he claimed that he was a single father of 2 who was forced to take care of his 2 young children after his wife allegedly abandoned their family. He claimed he did not have to work because he gained a large inheritance from his family, so it was easy for him to take care of his children and still remain active in society. The Survivors Foundation immediately recognized the children in the photograph as Roberto Jose and Maria Mercedes. However, Roberto changed his appearance so much that he was basically unrecognizable. Regardless, the group brought the information to the Guatemalan police, who relayed the information to the High Command in Mexico, explaining that a fugitive from their country may be residing there and they will need their help in capturing him. The 2 countries carried out an operation that led to the capture of Roberto along with his children on November 8, 2013. Roberto was arrested in the city of Mérida in Yucatan, Mexico, about 782 miles from San Jose Peñuela, where he originally resided in Guatemala. Roberto Sr. and the children were extradited back to Guatemala, and the children were reunited with their grandparents, Angelis and Juan Luis, who were more than relieved to see their grandchildren alive after being fearful that their fate matched their mother's after all this time. On February 20th, 2014, Roberto Barrera was charged with femicide, child abuse, and obstruction of justice. The family was now reunited and pretty hopeful that Cristina would soon get the justice she deserved. Her alleged murder and all the people who played a part in her disappearance were finally in custody. Unfortunately, however, on March 25th of 2013, Ofelia de Leon was already released from jail before her son was even formally charged for his crimes. She posted bail and she was placed under house arrest as terms of her release. And it would take another 5 years for court proceedings to finally begin in the case of Cristina's disappearance and apparent murder. In 2018, the first few hearings took place, and the now 14 or 15-year-old Roberto Jr. recounted his versions of events from that night before his mother disappeared, when he was only just 7 years old. Roberto Jr. said he was in his bedroom that night of July 6, 2011, when he heard his parents arguing for hours. He could hear his mother's screams and pleas for help even over the blaring sound of the TV. But eventually her voice seemed to fade into the night and he never heard from his mother again. Roberto's account of that night directly matched Petrona's, the housekeeper. And after all the hearings were completed, the prosecution were able to reconstruct the true events of Cristina Siekavizza's last moments. On July 6, 2011, Cristina and Roberto Sr. were having an intense domestic dispute that eventually turned physical. Cristina was sadly beaten to death by her husband, who then removed her body from the home and into his vehicle, where he drove to numerous locations around the country searching for where he could hide her body. With the help of his mother, Ofelia, he was able to hide all evidence of his crime, including cleaning and replacing his car's carpets. Not only did Ofelia help Roberto clean and conceal his crime, but it's also alleged that she also played a part in another murder. Alfonso Alejandro de la Vega Monzon was a very proficient and accomplished investigator hired by the Siekavizza family directly after her disappearance in July of 2011. However, just a few weeks later, on August 31st, Alfonso was murdered in his home by 3 men who posed as employees of a phone company offering him a new cellular device. As Alfonso invited them inside, the men drew guns and began shooting at him, murdering him in his own home. Hector Rodolfo, Carlos Miguel Estrada Carrera, and Edward Napoleon Morales were all arrested in February of 2014 for the murder, and they were investigated by the Guatemalan Prosecution Office. It was discovered that the men were involved in drug trafficking and contract killings, and allegedly the men were hired by the Barrera family to murder Alfonso in order to prevent real investigation into Cristina's disappearance. As the trial was finally coming to an end in 2019, Judge Miguel Angel Galvez Aguilar deemed Roberto Beretta guilty and ordered for his imprisonment. Roberto's sentencing was scheduled for April 15th of 2020, and unfortunately, as we all know, 2020 was the year where the world basically stopped functioning in every aspect. The coronavirus pandemic did not only halt people's everyday lives, but also court proceedings all over the world, including this one. And just when Cristina and the Siekavizza family were all so close to justice, the case took a turn for the absolute worst on July 21st, 2020, 9 years after Cristina's murder. Roberto Beretta was admitted to the Respiratory Disease Patient Care Center from his jail cell at the Mariscal Zavala prison after falling ill from contracting COVID. Roberto was taken to San Juan Hospital and being treated for a respiratory infection, but hospital staff informed local news that he was not responding to the treatment. He developed respiratory failure due to severe pneumonia, which, if you didn't know, is the inflammation of the lungs due to an infection, and he was also suffering from hypoxia, which is a condition caused by insufficient oxygen in the body's tissues. Just 2 weeks later, on August 6 of 2020 at 11:35 a.m., Roberto Beretta was given the ultimate get-out-of-jail-free card, and he was pronounced dead. Unfortunately for the Siekavizza family, justice would never come. And to make matters even worse, on September 30th, 2020, Ophelia was granted an opportunity criteria, which in Guatemala basically allows the prosecutor's office to either continue prosecuting someone or reduce their charges, and Ophelia's charges were ultimately reduced to nothing. Her only stipulation was to pay Patrona, the housekeeper, 4,000 quetzales, or $518 for threatening her and her family's lives after the murder. Oscar Cuevas, the Beretta PI, also got the same opportunity and had his charges dropped as well. He was only ordered to pay 10,000 quetzales, or $1,306.17 in US dollars, to the Siekavizza children, and to never have contact with anyone in the Siekavizza family. Over the years, there have been numerous attempts to find Cristina's body since 2011, and specifically from November of 2020 to June of 2021, up to 47 exhumations were conducted in over 6 departments of the country to try to find her remains. From farms to graveyards, everywhere has been searched for Cristina, but unfortunately, she was never found, and her remains are still missing to this day. And sadly, this is where our story ends today. But we don't have to end things on such a sad note because Cristina's family surely did not. Her children Maria and Roberto Jr. have continued to excel in their lives, becoming well-rounded and intelligent kids despite their immense trauma. As of 2025, Roberto Jr. is now 21 years old and attending the University of Guatemala studying computer science, and he is on track to get his bachelor's degree in 2027. Roberto Jr. has represented Guatemala at numerous academic conferences and has won a few awards representing his college. He is on track to become a very successful and bright young man, and I'm sure his family is extremely proud, and his mother definitely would have been as well. Maria Mercedes is now 18 years old, and it was harder to find information about her and what she's been up to, but it does seem that she is fairly active in her community and supports the foundation that her family organized, Voces por Cristina, in support of finding her mother and advocating for victims of domestic violence. And I'm sure her mother would be extremely proud of seeing how beautiful her daughter has become and the great young woman that she's been growing up to be as well. Over the years, the Siekavizza family has continued to be outstanding members of their community. They've held numerous conferences, fundraisers, and campaigns in support of not only Cristina, but other victims of domestic violence, and they continue to keep Cristina's legacy alive. And as usual, I would like to bring our attention back to Cristina, our victim, and remember her for who she was. Cristina Siekavizza would have been 48 years old as of yesterday, December 9th. She deserves nothing more than to be here with her friends and family and her beautiful children. She's remembered as a woman that was kind, hardworking, loving, bright, and had an amazing future ahead of her. And everyone that loved her and knew her will continue to miss her every day. As we wrap up the case, I'm going to provide you all with some resources as usual. So if you or someone you know is or may be a victim of domestic violence, please do not hesitate to use the following resources. You can call 800-799-7233 or text BEGIN to 88788. In Guatemala, the helpline for domestic violence victims can be called at 502-1539, and you can text 502-403-72074. And with that comes the end of today's story of the gravely mishandled disappearance and alleged murder of Cristina Siekavizza. Alrighty guys, so we are now at the part of the show where we do our police/investigator ratings as well as our judge/jury rating. And this one's going to be very easy because we can just put them all under one big category, one big umbrella right now. You already know what they're going to get. F minus. F minus. Minus. Everyone's getting an F minus. From the abuse of power, obstruction of justice, the mishandling of the case, everything gets an F minus. This is the most ridiculous case. I'm doing all this research. Not only is the case really horribly handled, but the information was so horrible. Like, the least you can do is tell the truth about this woman's case, at least keep her legacy alive, try to do your best with just having everything be consistent and correct, first of all. I know English to Spanish or Spanish to English translation can get a little muddled sometimes, but it's 2025, big 2025. We should know exactly what we're saying. It should be no type of discrepancies between anything. And I would like to put the biggest shame on you to Ophelia because she's still here. Roberto, he's not even here anymore for me to be like going in on him. I'm not even about to do all that. He got exactly what was coming to him. But Ophelia, you were supposed to be a role model. You made history. You were the first female president of the Guatemalan Supreme Court. You were supposed to make history. You were supposed to pave the way for other women. You were supposed to be a role model for your little girls. You were supposed to be someone's idol. And instead you were an idiot. Like, what? You were supposed to be among the many women who have made history in not only Guatemala, not the US, all over the world, and you have tarnished your legacy forever. When someone looks up your name, they will not only see that you used to be the former president of the United States. They will not only see that you were the former president of the Guatemalan Supreme Court, but they will see that you were also one of the key pillars in another woman's disappearance and murder. You stood behind your idiot son and allowed him to abuse and murder a woman. Not only that, you covered up her death. At least the whole Barreda family, this goes to the whole Barreda family, the least you can do to have the slightest last chance of having decency left, the least you can do if you didn't care about Cristina or her family, at least care about your own grandchildren. At least care about your own niece and nephew, your own grandchildren, your own cousins. At least give them the peace of mind to know where their mother is at, where her body is. At least give them the opportunity to lay her to rest properly. At least. That's the least you can do after all this. After all the trauma, after them having to grow up and be orphans now and be taken care of by their grandparents, and being taken care of by the grandparents of their mother, who has to mourn her every day. They see Roberto Jr. looks exactly like his father. It's insane. They look like their parents to a T. So they have to see those faces every day and be reminded of somebody that they lost. At least give them the chance to bury their daughter. At least give them the chance to bury their mom properly. She's somewhere in the earth, somewhere just in the world. Like, that's so sick. At least have the decency to give your grandchildren some peace. But to end it on a little bit of a positive note, at least the community showed up and showed out. It really means a lot, especially as a woman. It means a lot to know that there's people in the world that really do care. When women are done wrong, when we're mistreated, when we're abused, when we're murdered, it means so much. It makes so much of a difference when people stand up and actually decide to come together and support women. Women are the most important people in the world. Sorry if you disagree because you're just wrong. Sorry. But to know that everybody really stood up and said, no, there is a problem going on in our country. We need to stand up against these powerful people too. They stood up and they showed out for Cristina. I really hope one day they can at least find her remains. I really do. Her family does not deserve this pain. And I really wish nothing but peace and healing for the Siekavizza family, for the children. I really feel so terribly that this is what happened and this is how things had to end. But at least the community stood behind them, and I'm just very proud of people for doing that. So our sources for this week's case have been 7newsbelize.com, amandala.com, Criminalista Nocturo on YouTube, oyandelaware.com, prensalibre.com, soy502.com, and wikipedia.org. And that is it for this week's case. Thank you guys so much again for always supporting me. Don't forget that the show has a TikTok and Instagram, YouTube. You can listen on all streaming platforms. We also have a Discord discussion group where we discuss each true crime case as well as anything currently happening in the world. And I just want to thank you guys so much for being so supportive. I'm sorry that I was gone for 2 weeks. It will not happen again. Unless it's an emergency, but of course I'll always communicate with you guys. But again, thank you so much for the support for the show. I am so thankful that you guys are here. Do not forget to take care of yourselves. Please take care of one another. And don't forget that I love you guys, okay? So I will see you guys next week to put more Mer and Murder. And be safe. I love you. Bye.